Okay, we're recording. Hello everyone, this is the 5th Epical Revelation Fellowship. I'm Reverend Dr. Roger Paul. And today we are going to study paper 141, beginning the public work in the Urantia Book. So this comes up. It starts at the... Okay, and that begins on page 1587.1. And let's say a little prayer and we'll get started. Okay. Father, thank you for bringing us together today that we might study this wonderful revelation. Pray that you will watch over us and bless us today and keep our hearts and minds open that we might remember this and share it with others. We thank you and we give you praise in Jesus' name. All right. Pam, would you like to start reading for us today?
Okay. On the first day of the week, January 19, A.D. 27, Jesus and the 12 apostles made ready to depart from their headquarters in Bethsaida. The 12 knew nothing of their master's plan except that they were going up to Jerusalem to attend the Passover feast in April, and that it was the intention to journey by way of the Jordan Valley. They did not get away from Zebedee's house until near noon because the families of the apostles and others of the disciples had come to say goodbye and wish them well in the new work they were about to begin.
And this is a map of their journey that they're fixing to take. And you can't see that, but that's what you look at it on the slides later. This is a better picture of it. You can see the home of Zebedee, and this traces the pathway of the dates. Okay. Diane, would you take the next one?
Just before leaving, the apostles missed the master, and Andrew went out to find him. After a brief search, he found Jesus sitting in a boat down the beach, and he was weeping. The 12 had often seen the master when he seemed to grieve, and they had beheld his brief sessions of serious preoccupation of mind, but none of them had ever seen him weep. Andrew was somewhat startled to see the master thus affected on the eve of their departure for Jerusalem, and he ventured to approach Jesus and ask, "On this great day, Master, when we are to depart for Jerusalem to proclaim the Father's kingdom, why is it that you weep? Which of us has offended you?" And Jesus, going back with Andrew to join the 12, answered him, "No one of you has grieved me. I am saddened only because none of my father Joseph's family have remembered to come over to bid us Godspeed." At this time, Ruth was on a visit to her brother Joseph at Nazareth. Other members of his family were kept away by pride, disappointment, misunderstanding, and petty resentment indulged as a result of hurt feelings.
All right, so you can see that even Jesus had normal human feelings and was hurt that his family did not come to wish him well on his
Guess I forgot that.
Yeah, really sad. Think about it. And the one person that would really have wished him well, Ruth, was not available. So.
Who was who?
The youngest of the children. All right. Jill, would you take the next one?
Leaving Galilee, Capernaum was not far from Tiberias, and the fame of Jesus had begun to spread well over all of Galilee, and even to parts beyond. Jesus knew that Herod would soon begin to take notice of his work, so he thought best to journey south and into Judea with his apostles. A company of over 100 believers desired to go with them, but Jesus spoke to them and besought them not to accompany the apostolic group on their way down the Jordan. Though they consented to remain behind, many of them followed after the master within a few days.
Okay, so he had up to 100 people that would have followed him. Come on in. Come on in.
Sorry to interrupt. That's Rascal.
Hey, Rascal.
Come on in. Come on in. You're blocking the stream. Come on in. All right. So he had 100 people that would have accompanied him with him on the trip, but he asked them not to, chose not to. I'm having a computer problem. Okay, the first day Jesus and the apostle only journeyed as far as Terracia, where they rested for the night. The next day they traveled to the corner of the Jordan near Pella, where John had preached about 1 year before, where Jesus had received baptism. Here they tarried for more than 2 weeks, teaching and preaching. By the end of the first week, several hundred people had assembled in a camp near where Jesus and the 12 dwelt, and they had come from Galilee, Phoenicia, Syria, Decapolis, Perea, and Judea. Would you take the next one, please?
Jesus did no public preaching. Andrew divided the multitude and assigned the preachers for the forenoon and afternoon assemblies. After the evening meal, Jesus talked with the 12. He taught them nothing new, but reviewed his former teaching and answered their many questions. On one of these evenings, he told the 12 something about the 40 days which he spent in the hills near this place.
It's interesting, this is their public work starting out, and yet Jesus did not start out preaching. Do you notice that? He left it up to the apostles. So he was letting them try out the information that he gave them so that they would have the experience themselves. It's kind of interesting when we think about it. All right. Rodney, would you like to take the next paragraph, please?
Okay, I'm on page 15 of the book.
Yeah.
Yes.
Paragraph 2. Many of those.
Many.
It's also on the display.
Yes.
Many of those who came from Perea and Judea had been baptized by John and were interested in finding out more about Jesus' teachings. The apostles made much progress in teaching the disciples of John, inasmuch as they did not in any way detract from John's preaching. And since they did not at this time even baptize their new disciples, but it was always a stumbling stone to John's followers that Jesus, if he were all that John had announced, did nothing to get him out of prison. John's disciples never could understand why Jesus did not prevent the cruel death of their beloved leader.
And one of them in particular kept this in the back of his mind up until the time of Jesus' death. Who was that? Judas, right?
Oh,
He didn't agree with the fact that Jesus did not get John out of prison, right? And that was one of his stumbling blocks right there. And it's interesting, too, that Jesus did everything he could not to contradict anything that John taught. Isn't that interesting? And some of the concepts that John had was not exactly the right way that Jesus taught, right? But he was very careful not to contradict him.
Speaking of John, to me at least, it's still a mystery the fact that they have actually had little encounter in their lives, right?
Yeah.
And that John was, before even he was born, he was decided, oh, this is the son, and he will do this, he will do that, and I don't know what kind of teaching he had to get there. So how,
John, you mean?
Well, yeah. I mean, how was he prepared to do what he did? Why
He was prepared through the Sanhedrin. His father was a priest.
for the knowledge? But how about as
a Nazarene, though, the Nazarene believed differently than the standard Sanhedrin Jews did. So John was brought up as a Nazarene and actually inducted into the Nazarene priesthood. John the Apostle was. So, John the Baptist was. So his views were different than Jesus' views, but Jesus did not even contradict his teaching as he came up. And it's interesting, they never really spent a lot of time together so that John could really understand the differences in the teaching. I think that Jesus felt the most important thing that John did was to herald in the message that he was coming.
Right, but how did he know that he was supposed to do that, or how did he get to that without being prepared for it?
As a child, he was told he was by Jesus.
So Jesus told him you haven't.
The Jews, not only Jesus, but his mother and father told him also, right? Because they knew that he was supposed to herald in the message that the new deliverer was coming. They thought it was the Messiah, right? But it was really the new deliverer. Okay. Justin, would you take the next one?
From night to night, Andrew carefully instructed his fellow apostles in the delicate and difficult task of getting along smoothly with the followers of John the Baptist. During the first year of Jesus' public ministry, more than 3/4 of his followers had previously followed John and had received his baptism. The entire year of AD 27 was spent in quietly taking over John's work in Perea and Judea.
So it's interesting here that all of John's followers had to be indoctrinated into the teachings of Jesus because they were slightly different, right? So the apostles had the task of trying to not ruffle the feathers of John's followers and yet bring them in line with what Jesus was teaching. And that's why they paired off one of John's and one of Jesus' teachings many times so that they could get the idea and the concepts of Jesus' teachings, right? So, very intelligent way that they did things. It really was. It's amazing they didn't have more problems than they did. Diane?
2. God's law and the Father's will. The night before they left Pella, Jesus gave the apostles some further instruction with regard to the new kingdom. Said the Master, "You have been taught to look for the coming of the kingdom of God, and now I come announcing that this long-looked-for kingdom is near at hand, even that it is already here and in our midst. In every kingdom that there must be a king seated upon his throne and decreeing the laws of the realm. And so have you developed a concept of the kingdom of heaven as a glorified rule of the Jewish people over all the peoples of the earth, with Messiah sitting on David's throne, and from this place of miraculous power promulgating the laws of all the world. But my children, you see not with the eye of faith, and you hear not with the understanding of the Spirit. I declare that the kingdom of heaven is a realization and acknowledgement of God's rule within the hearts of men. Truth, there is a king in this kingdom, and that king is my Father and your Father. We are indeed his loyal subjects, but far transcending that fact is the transforming truth that we are his sons. In my life this truth is to become manifest to all. Our Father also sits upon a throne, but not one made with hands. The throne of the infinite is the eternal dwelling place of the Father in the heaven of heavens. He fills all things and proclaims his laws to universes upon universes. And the Father also rules within the hearts of his children on earth by the Spirit which he has sent to live within the souls of mortal men.
Okay, so this is a perfect explanation of the kingdom of heaven right here. And this is in yellow. These are the words of Jesus in yellow. I made them in yellow so we could read them a little bit better than red. Okay? Now, interesting that he calls God the Father the King. What does that make Jesus? That makes him the Prince, right? The Prince of Peace. That makes sense? Okay? So, he is our concept of God, but God the Father is his Father. So that makes him the King, Jesus the Prince, right? That makes sense? Now, what does that make the eternal Son? That's a hard question, isn't it? That makes him...
Uncle?
Huh?
Uncle?
Makes him co-ruler, doesn't it? Because really, the kingdom of heaven is ruled by what? God the Father, God the Son, and God the Spirit, right? So, but the head is always the Father, right? All right. But I think this is a great explanation of the kingdom of heaven. Now, we take this kingdom of heaven concept and we try to plug it in our concept of a kingly realm, right? But it's next to impossible to do that because the kingdom of heaven he's talking about lives in the hearts of men, doesn't it? So there is no realm because the realm is everything and everywhere and everyone, right? Let's keep going. This is Jesus continuing to speak. Diane, you just read? Okay. Jim?
When you are the subjects of this kingdom, you indeed are made to hear the law of the universe ruler. But when, because of the gospel of the kingdom, which I have come to declare, you faith discover yourselves as sons, you henceforth look not upon yourselves as law-subject creatures of an all-powerful king, but as privileged sons of a loving and divine Father. Verily, verily, I say to you, when the Father's will is your law, you are hardly in the kingdom. But when the Father's will becomes truly your will, then are you in every truth in the kingdom, because the kingdom has thereby become an established experience in you. When God's will is your law, you are noble slave subjects. But when you believe in this new gospel of divine sonship, my Father's will becomes your will, and you are elevated to the high position of the free children of God, liberated sons of the kingdom.
Okay, it's very interesting. He says, faith discover yourself as sons. Remember Wednesday night we were talking about faith sons? That's what he's talking about here, because we are not real sons until we fuse with our adjusters. But here on this world, we're faith sons. We become sons of God by faith. And he mentions that right here at the very beginning. All right, and he explains the difference between faith sons and subjects to the kingdom. Yep, did y'all catch that? As a subject, you have to live by the law of the kingdom, right? You have no choice, right? But as faith sons, the Father's will becomes your will, okay? And then when the Father's will becomes your will, you want to do what God wills and live under His laws because of love rather than duty, right? You want to live under the subject of God because you're a son of God, right? He has a marvelous way of explaining this here, right? Okay, some of the apostles grasped something of this teaching, but none of them comprehended the full significance of this tremendous announcement, unless it was James Zebedee. But these words sank to the hearts and came forth to gladden their ministry during later years of service. What is it that would gladden their ministry? It's this concept of faith sonship, right? That's what gladdened their ministry. They knew they were part of what? The kingdom of God, for sure, right? Okay. Pam, would you take the next one?
The sojourn at Anathus. The Master and his apostles remained near Anathus for almost 3 weeks. The apostles continued to preach twice daily to the multitude, and Jesus preached each Sabbath afternoon. It became impossible to continue the Wednesday playtime, so Andrew arranged that 2 apostles should rest each day of the 6 days in the week, while all were on duty during the Sabbath services.
So 2 took off each day, and that way they all got a chance to rest. Rodney.
Peter, James, and John did most of the public preaching. Philip, Nathanael, Thomas, and Simon did much of the personal work and conducted classes for special groups of inquirers. The twins continued their general police supervision, while Andrew, Matthew, and Judas developed into a general managerial committee of 3 although each of these three also did considerable religious work.
So they each had their specialty, didn't they?
Including Judas.
Including
Even Judas did some considerable religious work.
Yeah.
Even there.
Yeah, he did. And the other thing interesting about Judas is, just like all the rest of the apostles, he was very dedicated to what he did up to the time of the betrayal, right? So, as far as the rest of the apostles were concerned, he was just one of the rest of them, right? So, it's interesting how a bad decision can throw you into something that terrible.
Yeah, it's
Justice. Yeah.
Andrew was much occupied with the task of adjusting the constantly recurring misunderstandings and disagreements between the disciples of John and the newer disciples of Jesus. Serious situations would arise every few days, but Andrew, with the assistance of his apostolic associates, managed to induce the contending parties to come to some sort of agreement, at least temporarily. Jesus refused to participate in any of these conferences. Neither would he give any advice about the proper adjustment of these difficulties. He never once offered a suggestion as to how the apostles should solve these perplexing problems. When Andrew came to Jesus with these questions, he would always say, "It is not wise for the host to participate in the family troubles of his guests. A wise parent never takes sides in the petty quarrels of his own children."
And that's pretty much the same as today, isn't it? We have a lot of different religious factions, right, that believe a lot of different things, and there is no one authority in anything, is there? So we still have our own little petty quarrels, right? All right. Diana.
The Master displayed great wisdom and manifested perfect fairness in all of his dealings with his apostles and with all of his disciples. Jesus was truly a master of men. He exercised great influence over his fellow men because of the combined charm and force of his personality. There was a subtle commanding influence in his rugged, nomadic, and homeless life. There was intellectual attractiveness and spiritual drawing power in his authoritative manner of teaching, in his lucid logic, his strength of reasoning, his sagacious insight, his alertness of mind, his matchless poise, and his sublime tolerance. He was simple, manly, honest, and fearless. With all of his physical and intellectual influence manifest in the Master's presence, there were also all those spiritual charms of being which have become associated with his personality: patience, tenderness, meekness, gentleness, and humility.
Wouldn't you love to have been there to see
I like the humility part as the Son of God and the actual God or the creator of our whole universe, right?
Yeah.
And they are humble. And when you look at many of us here having such a big head, that's
right.
I think it's really nice to contemplate.
It's easy to get the big head, isn't it?
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Jesus of Nazareth was indeed a strong and forceful personality. He was an intellectual power and a spiritual stronghold. His personality not only appealed to the spiritually minded women among his followers, but also to the educated and intellectual Nicodemus,
Yeah.
and to the hardy Roman soldier, the captain stationed on guard at the cross, who, when he had finished watching the Master die, said, "Truly, this was the Son of God." And red-blooded, rugged Galilean fishermen called him Master.
So it shows that he was a man among men. He wasn't just this little wimp, right, that ran around. That's the pity of some of the movies they've shown about Jesus. They don't show the man of Jesus, the ruggedness of Jesus.
They show the passive.
They show that's right, the passive Jesus. Pictures of Jesus have been most unfortunate. These paintings of the Christ have exerted a deleterious influence on youth. The temple merchants would hardly have fled before Jesus if he had been such a man as your artists usually have depicted. He was a dignified man. He was a dignified manhood. He was good but natural. He was good but natural. Jesus did not poise as a mild, sweet, gentle, and kindly mystic. His teaching was thrillingly dynamic. He not only meant well, but he went about actually doing good. So you can imagine this guy was a carpenter for 30 years, working hard out building things and stuff. He had huge muscles, well built, There wasn't anything that looked meek about Jesus, And that's what they're talking about here.
He was a fisherman too. And they're well built.
Yeah, that's
Yeah,
right.
that's-
That's right. Pam, would you take the next one?
The Master never said, "Come to me, all you who are indolent and all who are dreamers." But he did many times say, "Come to me, all you who labor, and I will give you rest," spiritual strength. The Master's yoke is indeed easy, but even so, he never imposes it. Every individual must take this yoke of his own free will.
All right, so right there it's telling you that he's not just wanting the weak and mild. He wants men that work also, right? I know.
You found
All
I
right.
must too. I like him.
Robin, would you take the next one, please?
Sure. Jesus portrayed conquest by sacrifice, the sacrifice of pride and selfishness. By showing mercy, he meant to portray spiritual deliverance from all grudges, grievances, anger, and the lust for selfish power and revenge. And when he said, "Resist not evil," he later explained that he did not mean to condone sin or to counsel fraternity with iniquity. He intended the more to teach forgiveness, to resist not evil treatment of one's personality, evil injury to one's feelings of personal dignity.
So he's telling us not to just go out and hang out with evil people, right? And do evil things, right? But he is telling us we want to counsel people in the proper way to live and try to resist treating people evilly or being evil to one another, right? Okay, so there's a big difference. Use your common sense, in other words, right? Okay, Justin, would you take the next one, please?
For teaching about the Father. While sojourning at Memphis, Jesus spent much time with the apostles, instructing them in the new concept of God. Again and again did he impress upon them that God is a Father, not a great and supreme bookkeeper who is chiefly engaged in making damaging entries against his errant children on earth, recordings of sin and evil to be used against them when he subsequently sits in judgment upon them as the just judge of all creation. The Jews had long conceived of God as a king over all, even as a father of the nation, but never before had large numbers of mortal men held the idea of God as a loving father of the individual.
So what kind of ideas did they have of God the Father? They thought he was the judge, right? He was this guy that was keeping track of everything you did wrong, and that way when you stood before him, he could point his finger at you and say, "Aha, I remember when you did that." But he wasn't that way at all, right? And that's what they're talking about. And that was basically the concept that the Jews have been taught since the beginning of time. And that's not his personality at all. Diane, would you take the next one?
In answer to Thomas's question, "Who is this God of the kingdom?" Jesus replied, "God is your Father, and religion, my gospel, is nothing more nor less than a believing recognition of the truth that you are his Son. And I am here among you in the flesh to make clear both of these ideas in my life and teachings."
So what's Jesus saying here? He's saying we're all in the same family. Our relationship with God is a family relationship. What do you think they stress in the Urantia Book that the most number one relationships we have is the family? It's because the concept of the family is the same concept we need to understand the Father, right? We are sons, and He is our Father. And how do you understand that? Right there. You know, in the family. Fathers and sons. Okay?
Daughters and mothers.
Daughters. That's right. Jill, did you take the next one? Oh, did I forget? Oh, sorry.
Thank you. Jesus also sought to free the minds of his apostles from the idea of offering animal sacrifices as a religious duty. But these men, trained in the religion of the daily sacrifice, were slow to comprehend what it meant. Nevertheless, the Master did not grow weary in his teaching. When he failed to reach the minds of all of the apostles by means of one illustration, he would restate his message and employ another type of parable for purposes of illumination.
Okay, so he started early to tell them that sacrifice was not necessary, right? At the same time, Jesus began to teach the 12 more fully concerning their mission to comfort the afflicted and minister to the sick. The Master taught them much about the whole man, the union of body, mind, and spirit to form the individual man or woman. Jesus told his associates about the 3 forms of affliction they would meet and went on to explain how they should minister to all who suffer the sorrow of human sickness. He taught them to recognize, number 1, diseases of the flesh, those afflictions commonly regarded as physical sickness. Number 2, troubled minds, those non-physical afflictions which were subsequently looked upon as emotional and mental difficulties and disturbances. And 3, possession of evil spirits. Now, up to the time of Pentecost, this is a normal thing, right? Evil spirits did actually possess people. We know now that that does not happen after Pentecost. Why?
The Spirit of truth.
The Spirit of truth, that's right, and the Holy Spirit, right? The Spirit of truth was poured out upon all flesh, which made it impossible for these evil spirits to possess human beings. Okay?
And who are those evil spirits?
Midwayers. Those were the rebel midwayers running around. And they were not taken off the planet till when? Till Pentecost, right? At Pentecost, all the primary and the secondary midwayers that had rebelled were taken away to the Father's prison world, waiting judgment.
So, hold on a second. So, is it that prevented them from possessing people, or is it the Spirit of truth?
It's the Spirit of truth.
Or if they were not on the planet, could they possess? If the Spirit of truth was not poured upon all flesh, could they possess?
They could have, yeah, the current midwayers, if they decided to rebel, they could have possessed people. But because the Spirit of truth came out and was poured out on all flesh, it became our shield. It's our protection against possession, period. Okay? And remember, all right, and this is probably a good time to bring up this point. The thought adjuster lives within us, right? The Spirit of truth and the Holy Spirit is an external force to us. They protect us. Okay? The Father protects us from within. The Spirit of truth and the Holy Spirit protects us from without. That's why they say the Spirit of truth is the shield and the Holy Spirit is the sword. Okay? The sword and shield of God, basically. So devil possession cannot happen after Pentecost. Now, what is going on with all these things we see on TV, devil possession and all that?
A mental disturbance.
Mental disturbance. It's insanity. Things like that. Right?
So, are there still evil spirits on this planet that, like for example, if there is a new midwayer or turn?
No. No midwayers, anything. The only one that was unclear in the Urantia Book, during the printing of the Urantia Book, they don't clarify this, and that is when Calagasta it was removed from the planet. It's unclear.
Calagasta might still be here.
Could still be here. Right. Yeah.
Why?
Because he has not been called before the Ancients of Days yet. Okay? And being a planetary prince, he's a descending son of God. He has to be summoned before the Ancients of Days to be removed. Now, it's up to the Ancients of Days. At any time, they could send an archangel to pick him up and take him to the prison world. We don't know. Could have happened 2 weeks after the Urantia Book was published. We just don't know.
But he doesn't have any power over
But he has no
any
power over anyone.
midwares or...
No. No. But all the rebel midwares have been removed. And any other being that would go into rebellion at this point would automatically be removed. And why is that? Because Michael has been declared sovereign of the universe, right? And that means what? That means any rebellion would be immediately taken care of. Okay? So that's why any rebellious being on this planet would be removed immediately if they made a decision to go on rebellion post the Lucifer rebellion. But the Lucifer rebellion, because of the way it's being handled, it has to be adjudicated. The only thing we are not sure about is Calligastus. We know that Satan was taken in. Remember, because in the Urantia Book it tells us that Jesus saw Satan fall as a star, right? So Satan was removed, right?
And then Beelzebub?
Beelzebub would have been removed with the midwares at Pentecost, right? All the other top leaders of the rebellion would have been removed from the planet at Pentecost, with the exception of whom? Calligastus. Because he was what? The acting planetary prince. Well, he was still titled as the planetary prince. The actual acting planetary prince would have been Emmanuel. And, well, actually Melchizedek at 12. They were in receivership of the planet during that period of time, right? The 12 Melchizedek. So, okay. All right, let's keep going.
Next.
Yeah.
Roger,
Pam,
next,
just read.
next page.
No, next page.
Next page.
Oh, sorry. Oh, I am sorry.
Yeah, and then I think,
Yeah.
Jesus explained to his apostles on several occasions the nature and something concerning the origin of these evil spirits in that day, often also called unclean spirits. The Master well knew the difference between the possession of evil spirits and insanity, but the apostles did not. Neither was it possible, in view of their limited knowledge of the early history of Urantia, for Jesus to undertake to make this matter fully understandable, but many times said to them, alluding to these evil spirits, "They shall no more molest men when I shall have ascended to my Father in heaven, and after I shall have poured out my Spirit upon all flesh, in those times when the kingdom will come in great power and spiritual glory."
There it is, right? Millie, did you take the next one, please?
From week to week, from month to month, throughout this entire year, the apostles paid more and more attention to the healing ministry of the sick.
Did the apostle have any power, quote unquote, to heal people?
They could order them out in the name of Christ, right? Personally, they had no power over them, but the power of Christ did.
So did the power of Christ work with them to cast out evils? So if they say evil, get out of there?
It was supposed to, yes, if they had faith. The question was their faith enough to believe? If they believed they wielded the power of Christ or the power of the Holy Spirit, yes, they could order evil spirits out.
What about for physical sickness?
Physical sickness, this is my personal opinion, especially on the video. My personal opinion is that no. The reason Jesus could heal the sick is because he was a creator son. He had control of the mechanical physical controllers, all the physical controllers of all the universe. All he had to do was will something to be done, and they would immediately make the change, right? He could change matter immediately. How did he do that? He did that through the mechanical physical controllers. Those are the beings that actually controlled the atoms, all right? He had that power. Why did he have that power? Because he was a creator son. Anything a creator son wills immediately comes into being. We know that from what? Turning the water into wine, right? It works the same way with the sick. That's why Jesus could think about healing a sick person and it happens. Why? Because it's the will of a creator son. Now, did the apostles have that power? Probably not. But Jesus told them that they could heal the sick if they had the faith, right? So how would they do that? They would do it through the power of Christ, again, right? Do any of us have that much power, that we have that much faith to heal the sick? I don't know. I really don't. I was a doctor for 20 years. I worked on a lot of people and made a lot of people feel better. Did I heal anybody? No. Not a single patient over all those years I practiced. I did not heal one person. Does your doctor heal you? No. You can go to the hospital. Do they heal you? No, they don't. What heals you?
Your faith.
Your faith. That's right. The human body heals itself, right? They put the molecules, the things in action so that your body can get healed, right? Did they actually do the healing? No. You know, they're just an instrument. And that's what Jesus tried to teach his apostles. We are just instruments of God, right? If we do the will of God, we have more power. If we don't do the will of God, do we have that power? Of course not. We're just humans. But the reason Jesus could just think about healing someone is because why? He was a creator son. Did he have the power? Of course he did. You know, I mean, he created the universe. You think he had the power to change the physical matter, to take away the disease and heal you? Of course he does.
I think that was one of the vows that he took when he became, when he actually became restored, is that he would not use those powers.
That's exactly right.
It was suggested that he...
It was suggested that he did not use those powers. Now, let's not get confused here. Why did those things happen then? Because he always preceded it with what? If it be my Father's will. Right? So, did Jesus wield the power haphazardly on his own? No. He always did what? Ask the Father if it be his will that this happen. And of course, he's the Son of God. If it's his will, it's going to happen, right?
But I thought also, like when his mother implored him to help, it was an emotional
Sympathy.
wanting, yeah.
Yeah.
And so it happened instantly, but he really
Yes.
didn't intend.
Yeah, but that's why he didn't intend to do it, though, if you think about it.
Yeah.
He let his personal emotions, his human emotions, not his creator son emotions, his human emotions overwhelm him. And even though it was his human emotions, he's still the creator son. So what he wills becomes, as long as it's the will of the Father. Right?
And his emotional desire was not against the will of the Father. It was
That's right.
That's why the Father agreed upon it.
That's right. That's a lot of power. Remember, he had finished his sovereignty of the universe by the time he started his ministry, right? So, in essence, when Jesus was doing his ministry, walking around as a human, he was what? He was a master creator son. He had full sovereignty of his entire universe, right? Nebuchadnezzar. Okay? So, what he wanted to happen could happen at any time. If Jesus chose, in the middle of his ministry, he could have said, I've had enough of this, I'm going to take myself off. He could have left this body immediately. But he chose not to. He wanted to do the will of the Father, and he felt the will of the Father was to continue the entire bestowal. Right?
Mine go through the sacrifice,
Yeah. Yeah.
the crucifixion.
That's what the sacrifice is about, right? The sacrifice is, he sacrificed his position as ruler and sovereign of our universe to do what?
To carry out his Father's will.
To carry out his Father's will and do what else? He wants to show his children the proper way to live and to love the Father and love each other. Right? That's the sacrifice.
And he wanted to continue his teaching.
He wanted to continue his teaching. He loved his children so much that he would put himself through the worst torture humanly imaginable so that we would understand the love of the Father.
But not only us on this planet, but other mortals on other planets.
All planets, right? All the planets within his
That's
purview.
his children.
That's right. That's his children. All his children. You can imagine, y'all, you have to think about this. When you think about the crucifixion of Christ, you know through the universal broadcast that every planet that had the universal broadcast available was watching the Son of God being tortured on this planet, right? Y'all understand that.
Watching the Creator Son of this universe.
Creator Son, they were watching this as it happened, okay?
It's horrible.
I mean, can you imagine a whole local universe, eyes just completely focused on a universal broadcast, just like a TV, really, you know, of all this happening when it was going on. You know, they were probably thinking, how can these humans do this? You know, what are they thinking? You know, they were probably all waiting for 10 million archangels to come down and just wipe us all out. You
Well,
know?
they were all cringing that I could help him.
Yeah.
He could help himself.
Yeah, but
We're ready
nobody,
to help right now.
nobody could do anything except himself. Without the word of the Creator, they could not do anything, right? It's just,
But to me, I don't know, you seem to present that as being an exemplification of the love of God.
yeah.
To me, this is not the love of God that strikes me in that crucifixion event, as much as it is actually the love of God in a way has been misinterpreted, and then you have the whole atonement doctrine and all that, and
It's
that
got
came in.
nothing to do with the atonement, yeah.
That has nothing to do, but if you view it from God's wanted it was the love and the will and all blah blah blah, that leads to confusion, which I think there have been. To me,
I don't think it was God's will that Christ was crucified. I don't think that was the will of God at all. I think the will of God was that Jesus finished his bestowal. That was the will of
the
God.
natural way.
But died naturally. But
That's right. That's what's powerful to me.
that's exactly right. But shows the love of the Son towards the Father and towards his creation to go through the worst possible death imaginable
And still forgive.
and still forgive. That's right. If Christ had not died on the cross, would we have would it been as popular and as
Big of an impact.
big of an impact on the world? For us, probably not. For the rest of the universe, it would have been. But for us, probably not.
No, what I would have said is that, well, you had it easy, so
Yeah.
you could escape it, right?
He'd have been like Gandhi. He'd have been like Buddha. He'd have been like all these other prophets that's come along and done good and died a natural death. Right? That's the difference. The difference is because of the way Christ died, it highlights his dedication and love for his creatures 1,000 times what any other prophet has done, right?
Plus, after he was resurrected, he spoke with so many of his disciples, and I mean, nobody else has ever done that.
That's really the difference between him and everyone else. We forget about the resurrection and the appearances. You know, me and Diane were talking about this the other day. 19 appearances. Jesus made 19 appearances in his Urantia form. Can you imagine that? He appeared to 19 different groups of people in a different form than he left this earth in, right? So, you know, if there was any question about his divinity, that should have taken care of it right then. You know, I mean, how are you going to question that? Has any other being ever come back to the planet?
No.
No. We've never seen any, anyway. You know, and it's interesting that no one else has even claimed to have done that. You know, it's just amazing to me. All right, let's keep moving. Billy, did you just take the last one?
She had a little sentence to it.
Why don't you take this one and let Rodney take the one after this?
Number 5, spiritual unity. One of the most eventful of all the evening conferences at Amathus was the session having to do with the discussion of spiritual unity. James Zebedee had asked, Master, how shall we learn to see alike and thereby enjoy more harmony among ourselves? When Jesus heard this question, he was stirred within his spirit, so much so that he replied, James, James, when did I teach you that you should all see alike? I have come into the world to proclaim spiritual liberty to the end of that mortals may be empowered to live individual lives of originality and freedom before God. I do not desire that social harmony and fraternal peace shall be purchased by the sacrifice of free personality and spiritual originality. What I require of you, my apostles, is spirit unity, and that you can experience in the joy of your united dedication to the wholehearted doing of the will of my Father in heaven. You do not have to see alike, or feel alike, or even think alike in order spiritually to be alike. Spiritual unity is derived from the consciousness that each of you is indwelt and increasingly dominated by the spirit gift of the Heavenly Father. Your apostolic harmony must grow from the fact that the spirit hope of each of you is identical in origin, nature, and destiny.
Well, we need to read this over and over and over and over, don't we? Okay, so are we going to all interpret this book alike?
No.
No, not even close, right? Because each one of us has different experiential values, right? So when I read this, I'm going to read something. Rodney reads it, he's going to read something else. Pam reads it, she's going to read something else. When Justin reads it, he's going to read something else, right? So does that mean we can't get together and as a group and be under unity, a spiritual unity? No. We can all have different opinions, different ideas, different values, and still be under what? The same tutelage of God the Father and the will of God, right?
And you know what, Roger, we all have a different relationship with the Father.
That's right.
Well,
We do.
I think the differences have a lot to do in terms of what you plan on doing and what you do and how you go about it, right?
Yeah.
You know, the political views, even the spiritual view in terms of how do you teach the mass and how what is your personal ministry, what is all of those, right?
Yeah.
Though there are some parts of Urantia Book that are subject to interpretation, there are parts that are not.
Yeah, that's right.
And
That's why we keep stressing when we have these meetings. When I teach, it's my opinion, nothing else. You can take it with a grain of salt. All we try to do is point to the book and shed some light on understanding a little bit, right? But I don't have all the answers. You don't have all the answers. None of us do, right? The book is there. You can take it, you can interpret it any way you want to. It's kind of like the Bible. You can take the Bible. Now, how many times have you all gone to a church class and one preacher will interpret something one way and another preacher will interpret it totally different? It's the same principle, isn't it?
and you're reading something different.
And you're reading something different. That's right. So that's basically what it is. And it basically comes down to our experience, right? How we look at things. And so each person will give its own little view of what's reality.
But usually those differences, I would add, are not very deeply spiritual. What I mean is that when you get to something that is really, in essence, spiritual, devoid of all the other things, then this is amazing, despite all the disagreements between all the religious group of the people,
Yeah.
how you can actually converge to achieve the same principles.
There's a consistency through it all.
Despite all the different, and usually the differences
Yeah.
would be like what Jesus was referring a few pages ago as the quarrels of petty quarrels of children, of my children, that he doesn't want to get into right? It's like those little details of that are of not very great importance.
Yeah.
But the heart of the spiritual essence, the essence of the spirituality, we have unity if we are honest.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting too, if we think back of what we just read about John the Baptist and the apostles, or the followers of John the Baptist and the apostles. Perfect example, isn't it? Because John had taught them a certain way of thinking, right? And so then Jesus' apostles come along and they have a different way of thinking. So they have to find a spiritual unity between the two and mesh together, even though they have different backgrounds, right? So it's a perfect example of this. Okay, let's keep going. Rodney, would you take the next one?
In this way, you may experience a perfected unity of spirit purpose and spirit understanding growing out of the mutual consciousness of the identity of each of your indwelling paradise spirits. But you may enjoy all of this profound spiritual unity in the very face of the utmost diversity of your individual attitudes of intellectual thinking, temperamental feeling, and social conduct. Your personalities may be refreshingly diverse and markedly different, while your spiritual natures and spirit fruits of divine worship and brotherly love may be so unified that all who behold your lives will of a surety take cognizance of this spirit identity and soul unity. They will recognize that you have been with me and have thereby learned and acceptably how to do the will of the Father in heaven. You can achieve the unity of the service of God even while you render such service in accordance with the techniques of your own original endowments of mind, body, and soul.
There you go.
There you go.
Here it is.
There it is. Right. I'm not going to expand on that. I think Jesus said it well enough.
Exactly.
Justin, would you take the next one?
I was interested to see the word acceptably. You haven't learned perfectly, but you've learned acceptably
That's right.
how to do the will of the Father.
Yeah, we got to a point, right? We're not perfect yet, but we're getting there.
To the best they could.
Yeah.
Right? And the question is, are we doing the best we can individually?
Yes.
We're never doing the best we can.
We never do, but we try. We strive for that, right?
We're always evolving.
Some of us more so than others,
That's right.
and some not so much.
Justin, would you take the next one?
Your spirit unity implies two things, which always will be found to harmonize in the lives of the individual believers. First, you are possessed with a common motive for life service. You all desire above everything to do the will of the Father in heaven. Second, you all have a common goal of existence. You all purpose to find the Father in heaven, thereby proving to the universe that you have become like Him.
Okay, so the spirit unity implies two things. First, you have a common motive for life service. Isn't that nice? That's really beautiful. And above all, you desire to do everything within the will of the Father in heaven. Right? And second, you have a common goal of existence. The purpose to find the Father in heaven. And what's that about? The ascension plan, right? That's what they're talking about here. We was reading, I think it was this week, in one of the papers this week, paper 40, was it 40 or 41? We did them. I get confused because I work on so many different things during the week, but we were talking about, now I've lost my whole train of thought. Let's just go.
Well, you were talking about the ascension.
The ascension plan, that's right. The ascension plan. How the number one goal of human existence is to learn about the ascension plan. Did y'all know that? You know, the number one goal of this existence is to learn about the trip to God.
It's a personal
The
growth.
Yeah,
whole existences,
that's right.
it's their purpose.
That's right. All right. Okay. Diane.
Many times during the training of the 12, Jesus reverted to this theme. Repeatedly, he told them it was not his desire that those who believed in him should become dogmatized and standardized in accordance with the religious interpretations of even good men. Again and again, he warned his apostles against the formulation of creeds and the establishment of traditions as a means of guiding and controlling believers in the gospel of the kingdom.
And what happened?
And that's exactly what.
That's exactly what happened, right? The Catholic Church. This is a perfect example, right? That's exactly what we did. We formulated creed and traditions, and it went from the process of finding God the Father to going in and doing your creeds and traditions, right? Just rote memory.
Recently, I was talking to an almost 90-year-old man, a Baptist, and or maybe he was evangelical, but anyway, he said, I'm really concerned, what is your religion? I said, well, I was born Catholic and raised Catholic. He says, well, they're not Christian. And I said, they were the original Christians. And he had to really think about that.
I need to ask a question.
Yeah.
At what time did Jesus separate the apostles and make them have different religions, different languages, so they could go all over the world?
He did them all.
Who did that?
Huh? They all had, all of them came from different backgrounds, but
They all had their own languages.
they all had different, many of them knew different languages. Like Jesus himself knew 7 languages, so as he sent them out, they went to different places, and many of them adapted to the new language of the places they went, right? They had to,
And it's something that we're going to have to learn.
That's exactly what we're going to have to do when we get to the mansion worlds, because we're going to, number one, have to learn the local universe language and then the super universe language. Plus, we'll probably want to learn some of the languages of the other beings on the mansion
Just so we can communicate.
Just so we can communicate easily.
Yeah, whatever, planet Earth, right?
It's a
We're in
lot of
our own
education.
planet.
Yeah.
When we resurrect on the mansion world, are we going to be able to communicate in English or whatever our native tongue was on the planet?
Yeah, we definitely will.
So we remember our native language?
We'll remember our native language, and our guardian, that's part of the job of our guardian angel, is when we first get there to make sure that we understand what's going on, because we'll have people assigned to us, or beings assigned to us to help us learn the new languages.
Right, but before that, we remember we'll be able
that-
to speak say English like right now.
Yeah, because when you wake up, all your friends and family will be there, right? So you'll need to communicate them in your original tongue, because that's
Does it explicitly say so?
Yeah.
And other than that, how would you be able to learn unless it was a language that you knew right off the bat?
I don't know. I can think of ways where you do by, like, for example, the first time I learned English, I knew only French. I was in the classroom. I didn't know a word of English, and the professor was excellent. He didn't speak a word of French in the classroom. And guess what? That year, I made humongous progress in English, right? And without a word of French. So he was able to teach us without speaking a word of French. So I can imagine that this can happen on the mansion world. We don't know how to speak anything, but they pointing fingers and little by little.
That's what I imagine.
That's what I imagine. This is why I was asking this question, and I was explicitly asking. It was explicitly said in the book that we are really communicating our
original tongue. Yeah, look, that's one of the reasons the guardian seraphim have to be schooled in many tongues, because they may get assigned to many people in many different languages. Also, many of the seraphim that's assigned to this planet have to learn all the languages of the planet. If we have 60 languages, they have to know them all. So if they get the job of guardian seraphim, then they have to go with you to the mansion where when you awake, they speak to you in your own tongue, right? The other reason they have to do that is they have to communicate between the different groups that speak different languages so that we don't get in fights and things. When we get to the mansion worlds. You got
Yeah, the first thing you do is get a fight.
Yeah, right.
What about the harp of God? I thought that
The
that
harp
was
of
a
God-
translator for different
That's a
languages.
translator. Now that usually, from what I understand, that comes in when we get to Urantia.
Oh, Urantia, okay.
Yeah. Up to that point, we get translators to help us out. When we get to the capital, then we have the harp of God because there's so many different beings coming from so many different backgrounds that it helps us translate. The harp of God she's talking about, it takes any language and translates it into your native language.
Sort
Now,
of like a smartphone.
like a smartphone.
And that's what we envision.
Yeah.
A little iPod.
A little iPod or smartphone, something like that. That's called the harp of God. Now, the interesting part is this. We have to learn the local universe language, the language of Nebanon, right? And then we also have to learn the super universe language, which is different. Isn't that interesting? So you have a local universe language, then you have a totally separate super universe language. You would think once you get through the mansion world, you would be conversant enough in the local universe language to almost communicate with anyone. But apparently not, because we still have to have the harp of God.
Good question, Bill. Thanks for asking.
The local language, so that means that everybody from different backgrounds and language speak one language.
That's right, global,
Yeah.
right? But, okay, now y'all I'm going to throw a monkey wrench in on this, okay? Confuse y'all even more. Remember, we are the local universe of Nebanon, right? We have student visitors from all over the universes, right? So why do you think you have a harp of God? Those student visitors come from other universes that have different languages.
locals.
That's right.
I like the idea of intuitive communication.
That's
I
right.
know.
That makes
You
sense?
know?
Just send them a thought and just.
Yeah.
I don't know why it doesn't work that way.
Yeah.
Just intuitively.
Yeah, it doesn't. Okay, so we're getting bogged down here. Let's keep going. I don't even remember who's supposed to read.
Maybe me.
Huh?
Maybe me.
Jill?
I think so. Next slide. Roger,
Huh?
next slide.
Oh, no,
Well,
okay.
I guess I did that one. I just read
Alright.
this one. So, that's
Okay, last week at
exactly it.
Last week at Amethyst. Near the end of the last week at Amethyst, Simon Zelotes brought to Jesus one Tiherma, a Persian doing business at Damascus. Tiherma had heard of Jesus and had come to Capernaum to see him, and they are learning that Jesus had gone with his apostle down the Jordan on the way to Jerusalem. He set out to find him. Andrew had presented Tiherma to Simon for instruction. Simon looked upon the Persian as a fire worshipper, although Tiherma took great pains to explain that fire was only the visible symbol of the pure and holy one. After talking with Jesus, the Persian signified his intention of remaining for several days to hear the teaching and listen to the preaching.
So you see how something simple like this can be misunderstood? They thought he was a fire worshiper when the fire that they had was only the representation of what they thought was pure and holy.
What is a fire worshipper? What is a fire worshipper?
Someone who basically would worship fire like you worship God.
Oh, okay.
Okay? All right. When Simon Zelotes and Jesus were alone, Simon asked the master, "Why is it that I could not persuade him? Why did he so resist me and so readily lean an ear to you?" Jesus answered, "Simon, Simon, how many times have I instructed you to refrain from all efforts to take something out of the hearts of men, of those who seek salvation? How often have I told you to labor only to put something into these hungry souls? lead men into the kingdom, and the great and living truths of the kingdom will presently drive out all serious error. When you have presented to mortal man the good news that God is his Father, you can easier persuade him that he is in reality a Son of God. And having done that, you have brought the light of salvation to the one who sits in darkness. Simon, when the Son of Man came first to you, did he come denouncing Moses and the prophets and proclaiming a new and better way of life? I came not to take away that which you had from your forefathers, but to show you the perfected wisdom or vision of that which your father saw only in part. Go then, Simon, and teaching and preaching the kingdom. And when you have a man safely and securely within the kingdom, this is the time when such a one should come to you with inquiries to impart instruction having to do with the progressive advancement of the soul within the divine kingdom. Boy, I love this paragraph. Let me tell you why. When we give people the Urantia Book, right? There's truths in the Urantia Book beyond human imagination. It really is. So, can you impart all that's in the Urantia Book in a 60-second representation? No, you can't. All you can do is bring them to the water and let them drink for themselves, right? You can't change everything they've learned, all their experience, and try to implant with them everything that's in this book. You just cannot do it. So what do? You introduce them to the book and let them make the discovery voyage on their own. Isn't that what we do in the progressive plan to find God? We go on the discovery voyage on our own after death, right? That's what happens. And that's the way it's done. So introducing people to the Urantia Book, all you can do is bring the book to them. If you can get them to take a book and read it on their own, you've done your job. Everything you can possibly do. Because you can't teach them everything there is in that book in a short period of time. People have been studying this book for 50 years, and they still don't know anything. You know, look at me. I've been doing it for years and years and years. And I just have got the top of the crest right now. That's it. You know, and I'm able to teach the top of the crest because that's what I know. But the deep, deep, deep. There's guys that know this book so deep that it's they're eons beyond me.
And how many years have you been reading?
43 years.
43.
Yeah. So.
And me, like 35.
Yeah. It's a long time.
And I still, it's just...
Yeah. So this is a good paragraph for us, that we have to bring them into salvation. What is salvation? Salvation is the realization of the fatherhood of God and brotherhood of man. That's what salvation is about. It's not that Jesus died for your sins. Sorry, Baptist, but that's the truth. That's what salvation is. The fatherhood of God, the brotherhood of man. Right? You have to believe in your own survival to be saved. That's what salvation's about. Right? No arguments?
Well, and underneath that is the goodness and the love and righteousness and the love for that, the love for service and growing into that. And but one of the key elements is when someone has an error, like the atonement doctrine from the typical Christians, is I've learned that through experience myself. Instead of fighting,
you can't fight them. You can't
fight them on it.
No.
I've learned it was a lost cause.
Yeah.
So forget about fighting it.
Yeah.
Instead of saying no, you're wrong, it doesn't make sense. Say, oh well, again, for the love of God, do we agree on that? Righteousness is a good thing.
Yeah.
Love, service. Can we do service? Can we?
Yeah.
And then, as this paragraph said, let the Spirit do the work.
Yeah. I can tell you, in 1973, when I was reading this book through the first couple times, it was a spiritual struggle. It is. When you have brought up your whole life to think that Christ died for your sins, and that's what salvation was about, that was ingrained in my soul. I mean, it was ingrained to the point where that's who I was. And when you have a book come along and says, no, that's not what it's about. It's about the love of God and the brotherhood of man. It makes you mad. You know, because that's the way you've been taught to believe your whole life, because that's the way everybody else believes.
But
Right.
you weren't 50, 60, 70 years old.
No.
When you've been believing it that long, it's even harder.
Yeah, to let go of, isn't it? Yeah. It's like somebody rips part of you, your soul out, isn't it? You know?
I
Because-
disagree. To me, it was not.
They're sure if they listen to this book, they're going to hell.
Yeah, that's what they think.
It was not my personal experience, though I didn't have that one. I was brought up atheist, not so I didn't have the belief of those beliefs. But to me, it was actually more like, since it was making sense, it was answering my questions, so it was liberating.
Yeah.
It wasn't thrilling. Didn't have any of what you were.
Yeah. Well, when we were growing up, Mom can tell you, we always went to church. You know, every church you walked in, it was you were going to hell if you didn't believe with God. You know, the whole story. You know,
You have to be
And-
Baptist and
yeah, if you're Baptist, you know, there's always an invitation to come down so that you won't die. You know, and go to hell.
Be saved by the blood of Christ.
Yeah, that's right. It's the
All
blood of
about the
Christ.
blood.
That's right. It's all about the blood. You
It's
know.
the Holy
And-
Apostolic Church. You
The
have-
Holy Apostolic Church, and I think back on it and I think how gross and
It is gross.
if you think about it, it's the most gross concept you can think, that you have to be washed in blood to be saved. That's just
Barbaric.
barbaric and ridiculous to me
Primitive.
now.
It's primitive.
It's primitive, and that's exactly what it
We
is.
think we're so civilized.
Yeah, we do. It shows us how uncivilized we really are. That we believe that for 2,000 years, that's been the standard, right? It really has been. And it's a pity that the apostles let it get out of hand, so that that's the way the Catholic Church
Well,
believed too.
The Apostle Paul had a lot to do with that.
That's a big part of it, you know.
If I may relate to this, once in my first international Urantia conference, I remember the story of a Mormon relating the story of discovering the Urantia Book, and basically at some point he was like in a very difficult conundrum where basically he said, well, I kind of like it makes sense to me, but he was in conflict with the Mormon Church, and he was talking little by little with some of his peers, and basically his peers were telling me, look man, you have a choice to make, but you realize that if you keep on going with that Urantia Book stuff, you can't be with us, you're going to be part of us, you're going to lose your family, you're going to lose your children. And he was like, what do I do? And then he couldn't be dishonest with himself, and he went on, and basically he had to divorce, he couldn't see his children. I mean, I don't remember the whole details, but it was a very difficult, traumatic experience for him, just to be honest with himself with respect to the spiritual truth in the Urantia Book.
And that's a tough thing. You know, it really is. It's a struggle that all of us that believe in the Urantia Book eventually goes through. You know, all of us have to go through that spiritual struggle, and it's a tough road to hoe, as they say. And it really is. So let's go on. Is this the one I just read? Okay. Who's up? Pam?
Simon was astonished at these words, but he did as Jesus had instructed him, and Teharim, the Persian, was numbered among those who entered the kingdom.
Okay. Billy, did you take the next one?
That night, Jesus discoursed to the apostles on the new life in the kingdom. He said in part, when you enter the kingdom, you are reborn. You can teach the deep things of the Spirit to those who have been born only of the flesh.
Cannot.
I'm sorry, what?
You cannot teach.
You
You cannot teach the deep things of the Spirit to those who have been born only of the flesh. First, see that men are born of the Spirit, before you seek to instruct them in the advanced ways of the Spirit. Do not undertake to show men the beauties of the temple until you have first taken them into the temple. Introduce men to God and as the sons of God before you discourse on the doctrines of the fatherhood of God and the sonship of man. Do not strive with men, always be patient. It is your kingdom.
It is not.
It is not your kingdom. You are only ambassadors. Simply go forth proclaiming, this is the kingdom of heaven. God is your Father, and you are his sons. And this good news, if you wholeheartedly believe it, is your eternal salvation.
And that's what we have to do too, isn't it? That's the main message, that God is our Father and we are sons of God, right? The beauties of this and what's in this book, these are the instructions of the beauties of the temple, right? These are the things that tell us the pathway to God. This tells us where we're going and why we're going there. But what do men have to know before they do this? They have to, what? Know they're sons of God and that God is their Father. You have to accept that point before any of this is going to make any sense to you.
There is something else. You have to be honest.
You have to be
Right?
honest. Right.
Because a lot of those, how do you call the Pharisees, the people, the Sanhedrin?
Yeah, that's it.
They were smart, they were knowledgeable, they were all that.
Yeah.
They didn't have the purity of the heart.
That's right.
And with
They
that,
knew the letter of the law, but they didn't understand how the law applied to anything because they what? Were sons and daughters of God. Right?
right,
They weren't in the kingdom.
right, they didn't really fully. Yeah, but I think what was missing is the genuineness. This is the good heart.
The sincerity, right?
The sincerity, yes, the sincerity and the goodness, the purity in their desires.
Mhm.
And
It says time and again in this book that God or Jesus knows what you did and why you did it.
That's right.
Knows your intention.
Yeah. Not what you do, but your intention of what
He
you
knows
do.
both. He knows what you do and your intention.
That's right.
But what about someone who is, they're gonna pass away momentarily, and they don't know about, the brotherhood of man and the
That's what we need to.
but that they want to go on. Isn't that enough?
Yes, but they have to realize the fatherhood of God and the brotherhood of man, because in order to survive, they have to believe they will survive. And the only way they will believe they'll survive is to believe that there's a power higher than themselves, which would be God, right? And if they believe in a power that's higher than themselves, then they must be faith sons of that God.
I see.
That makes sense?
Yeah.
That's the whole message, is the fact that we are faith sons of God.
Okay.
More than anything else. But you have to believe in God to get to that point, right?
well,
If you don't believe in your own survival, you will not wake up on dimension worlds. I don't care what anybody tries to tell you. I mean, I've heard this over and over in Urantia meetings, and that everybody makes it, no.
And the Buddhists, because we were talking about, the different religions, and did you say that the Buddhists don't believe in a singular God? They believe in
They believe in a cosmic force.
cosmic force.
Yeah.
So then all Buddhists don't go on?
If they believe in their survival, yeah, because that cosmic force is their concept of God.
Oh.
You don't have to say, I believe in God. You might believe, you can call him Allah, you can call him El Elyon, you can call whatever you want to call him, it doesn't matter. It's still God the Father. It comes down to the first source and center, is what I call it. The first source and center is the Father of all. And it doesn't matter what religion you are, you can call him anything you want to. It's still the same concept of the Father to us. And if you have a concept of the Father, you are already a faith son of God, right? Because how would you have a concept of a Father unless you were a son? Does that make sense? Logically, one comes before the other. So, but what Jesus is saying here is that basically to us, is teaching the Urantia Book and sharing the Urantia Book, there's no reason to give someone the Urantia Book if they have no concept of the Father, right? We have to first bring them to the kingdom, then we show them the jewels of the kingdom, right? The jewels of the kingdom will mean nothing if they have no faith, right, in God the Father. It's really interesting, and I hate to use this. My brother, I'm sorry if I offended you, I don't mean to do that, but My brother has become a Christian after all these years, you know. And I've been talking to him for years and years and years and years. But just the last couple of years, he's made a profession of faith that he believes in God. For many years, he ran around and said he was agnostic, an atheist, and different things. But he has come to the realization of accepting God, right? And it doesn't matter to me what religion he goes into or anything else. The fact that he has stepped into the kingdom is all that matters. If he never reads the Urantia Book, that's okay. When he gets to the mansion world, he's going to learn all about this, whether he wants to or not, right? But this is the point Jesus is making. You can't bring someone into advanced knowledge without first being part of the kingdom, right? And I am so proud of him for making that step. And it just thrills my heart that he did. You know? But that's what Jesus is talking about here, right?
You know, even modern day Christians, most of them, they need to learn that they are sons of God.
Yeah.
The way that it's been taught is that man is children of the devil
Yeah.
or Satan until you're washed clean by the blood of Christ, and then you become the children of God.
And that's not true.
You are all children of the devil on this planet. It's the devil's planet.
It's not, though.
Until you're
Yeah.
washed clean with the blood,
Yeah.
then you turn to the children of God. They don't teach that you're a son of God.
Yeah. You're a son of God to start out with, and that Satan and Lucifer rebelled, right? And you can follow them into rebellion. And if you want to rebel against God, yeah, you can become a child of Satan, you know. But we're not born into that, you know. We really aren't. We're born as sons of God. All we have to do is accept it, you know. You can't take the title of a son until you take the acceptance of a father, right? How can you be a son if you don't accept the father? And daughter. Okay, let's keep going. I don't remember who's supposed to read.
I think it's mine.
Okay.
The apostles made great progress during the sojourn at Emmaus, but they were very much disappointed that Jesus would give them no suggestions about dealing with John's disciples, even in the important matter of baptism. All that Jesus said was, John did indeed baptize with water, but when you enter the kingdom of heaven, you shall be baptized with the Spirit.
What are they talking about there? The Spirit of truth, right? And that's exactly what happened at Pentecost. Justin, would you take that?
But you don't have to,
Dustin, I'm sorry.
No big deal.
I got a good friend, his name is Justin, like he
you don't have to go to heaven to have the Spirit of truth.
No.
No.
It says here that when you enter the kingdom of heaven, you shall be baptized.
When do you enter the kingdom of heaven? When you accept your sonship.
Got it? Okay.
Yeah. Justin.
7 at Bethany beyond Jordan. On February 26, Jesus, his apostles, and a large group of followers journeyed down to the Jordan, to the ford near Bethany in Jericho, the place where John first made proclamation of the coming kingdom. Jesus, with his apostles, remained here, teaching and preaching for 4 weeks before they went up to Jerusalem.
Okay, so they went on the all right, let's keep going. Diane?
The second week of the sojourn at Bethany beyond Jordan, Jesus took Peter, James, and John into the hills across the river and south of Jericho for a 3 days' rest. The Master taught these three many new and advanced truths about the kingdom of heaven. For the purpose of this record, we will reorganize and classify these teachings as follows.
Jesus endeavored to make clear that he desired his disciples, having tasted of the good spirit realities of the kingdom, so to live in the world that men, by seeing their lives, would become kingdom conscious and hence be led to inquire of believers concerning the ways of the kingdom. All such sincere seekers for the truth are always glad to hear the glad tidings of the faith gift which ensures admission to the kingdom with its eternal and divine spirit realities.
So he wanted them to, for individuals to want to become part of the kingdom by seeing the lives of the apostles, right? And they would also want to.
Appeal to their goodness and
That's right.
righteousness. And
That's right. The Master sought to impress upon all teachers of the Gospels of the kingdom that their only business was to reveal God to the individual man as his Father. That's their only business, to lead this individual man to become son conscious, then to present the same man to God as a faith son. That's the whole key right there, right? Both of these essential relations are accomplished in Jesus. He become indeed the way, the truth, and the life. The religion of Jesus was wholly based on the living of his bestowal life on earth. When Jesus departed from this world, he left behind no books, laws, or other forms of human organization affecting the religious lives of the individual. Why is that? Because the message is that God is our Father and we are faith sons. That's the whole ball of wax. Everything else is extra. Right? Make sense? All right. Pam.
Jesus made it plain that he had come to establish personal and eternal relations with men, which should forever take precedence over all other human relationships. And he emphasized that this intimate spiritual fellowship was to be extended to all men of all ages and of all social conditions among all peoples. The only reward which he held out for his children was, in this world, spiritual joy and divine communion. In the next world, eternal life in the progress of the divine spirit realities of the Paradise Father.
That's it. Okay? So this world, spiritual joy and divine communion. That's what we get. Nothing else. We don't get things. We don't get money. We don't get gold. We get spiritual joy and divine kingdom. The next world, we get what? The only thing that's important. Eternal life. Right? Okay. Millie, would you take the next one?
Jesus laid great emphasis upon what he called the two truths of first import in teaching of the kingdom, and they are the attainment of salvation by faith and faith alone, associated with the revolutionary teaching of the attainment of human liberty through the sincere recognition of truth. You shall know the truth, and the truth shall make you free. Jesus was the truth made manifest in the flesh, and he promised to send his spirit of truth into the hearts of all his children after his return to the Father in heaven.
He says it again there. You know, it's salvation by faith, not by atonement. Faith alone, right? Okay, you shall know the truth shall set you free. All right. Why did he say it that way, y'all? Do y'all remember? The Jews were in bondage to the law, right? And that's why it was so important to put it through that way, okay? They were bounded up by 630 different laws, okay? And he was setting them free, saying the only thing that's important is salvation by faith and faith alone, right? All right. Rodney.
The Master.
Yeah.
The Master was teaching these apostles the essentials of truth for an entire age on earth. They often listened to his teachings when in reality what he said was intended for the inspiration and edification of other worlds. He exemplified a new and original plan of life. From the human standpoint, he was indeed a Jew, but he lived his life for all the world as a model of the realm.
Okay, so his example was for all worlds, not just ours. I think it was just ours. Dustin.
To ensure the recognition of his Father and the unfolding of the plan of the kingdom, Jesus explained that he had purposely ignored the great men of earth. He began his work with the poor, the very class which had been so neglected by most of the evolutionary religions of preceding times. He despised no man. His plan was worldwide, even universal. He was so bold and
Empathetic.
empathetic in these announcements that even Peter, James, and John were tempted to think he might possibly be beside himself.
What's beside himself? He thought he might be insane, right?
Might be a little bit crazy.
Yeah. Diane?
He sought mildly to impart to these apostles the truth that he had come on this pastoral mission, not to set an example for a few earth creatures, but to establish and demonstrate a standard of human life for all peoples upon all worlds throughout his entire universe. And this standard approached the highest perfection, even the final goodness of the universal Father. But the apostles could not grasp the meaning of his words.
You know, you see this over and over and over again, that this was for all worlds, right? And it's hard for the apostle to get that concept because all they know is this world. You know, they don't know about the other world.
Well, and this world was still flat.
Yeah, that's right.
I would hope that Jesus had taught them about other worlds.
Well, he did, but it was hard for them to conceive of such things, you know. Jill, it's noon, just to let you know. I'm going to keep going. If anybody wants to stay, I'd like to finish this paper. It's about 13 more paragraphs, I think, something like that. So I just want to let you know in case you need to leave, you'll want to. Okay. Anybody else do? Do you want to read next, please? Jill?
Is it my turn?
Yeah.
He announced that he had come to function as a teacher sent from heaven to present spiritual truth to the material mind. And this is exactly what he did. He was a teacher, not a preacher. From the human viewpoint, Peter was a much more effective preacher than Jesus. Jesus' preaching was so effective because of his unique personality, not so much because of compelling oratory or emotional appeal. Jesus spoke directly to men's souls. He was a teacher of man's spirit, but through the mind. He lived with men.
It's interesting, they call him a teacher, not a preacher, isn't it? It is on this occasion that Jesus intimated to Peter, James, and John that his work on earth was in some respects to be limited by the commission of his associate on high. In other words, he was limited on what he was going to do and say, referring to the pre-bestowal instructions on it of his paradise brother Emmanuel. He told them that he had come to do the Father's will and only the Father's will, being thus made motivated by a wholehearted singleness of purpose. He was not anxiously bothered by the evil in the world. And we will remember these pre-bestowal charges on paper 119. If anybody's interested, you can read those by Emmanuel. Okay? Pam.
The apostles were beginning to recognize the unaffected friendliness of Jesus. Though the Master was easy of approach, he always lived independent of and above all human beings. Not for one moment was he ever dominated by any purely mortal influence or subject to frail human judgment. He paid no attention to public opinion, and he was uninfluenced by praise. He seldom paused to correct misunderstandings or to resent misrepresentation. He never asked any man for advice. He never made requests for prayers.
That would kind of be silly, wouldn't it? He was the creator of the universe. Why would he ask advice from someone else? Bill.
James was astonished at how Jesus seemed to see the end from the beginning. The Master rarely appeared to be surprised. He was never excited, vexed, or disconcerted. He never apologized to any man. He was at times saddened, but never discouraged.
Not the clear picture of Jesus that we expect, is it?
More clearly, John recognized that, notwithstanding all of his divine endowments, after all, he was human. Jesus lived as a man among men and understood, loved, and knew how to manage men. In his personal life, he was so human and yet so faultless, and he was always unselfish.
Yes.
Although Peter, James, and John could not understand very much of what Jesus said on this occasion, his gracious words lingered in their hearts. And after the crucifixion and resurrection, they came forth greatly to enrich and gladden their subsequent ministry. No wonder these apostles did not fully comprehend the Master's words, for he was projecting to them the plan of the new age.
Something they had not seen before, right? Diana.
8. Working in Jericho. Throughout the 4-week sojourn at Bethany beyond Jordan, several times each week Andrew would assign apostolic couples to go up to Jericho for a day or two. John had many believers in Jericho, and the majority of them welcomed the more advanced teachings of Jesus and his apostles. On these Jericho visits, the apostle began more specifically to carry out Jesus' instructions to minister to the sick. They visited every house in the city and sought to comfort every afflicted person.
The apostles did some public work in Jericho, but their efforts were chiefly of a more quiet and personal nature. They now made the discovery that the good news of the kingdom was very comforting to the sick, that their message carried healing for the afflicted. And it was in Jericho that Jesus commissioned to the 12 to preach the glad tidings of the kingdom and minister to the afflicted was first fully carried into effect.
Y'all, why do you think that this was such a relief to these people during this time? Because they were teaching something totally different than what they were used to. They were bound up by these Jewish traditions and the laws. They felt compressed all the time by all these laws they had to live by, right, with the Jewish religion. So when someone comes along and tells them that the only thing they have to worry about is the sonship, the fatherhood of God and the sonship of them to man, it's like somebody takes a big weight off of them, really. So that's why this is comforting to them. Do you understand that?
Yeah, it was very liberating.
Very liberating to them. That's right. Okay, they stopped in Jericho on the way up to Jerusalem and were overtaken by a delegation from Mesopotamia that had come to confer with Jesus. The apostles had planned to spend but a day here. But when these truth seekers from the east arrived, Jesus spent 3 days with them, and they returned to their various homes along the Euphrates, happy in the knowledge that the new truths of the kingdom of heaven. Parting from Jerusalem. Pam?
On Monday, the last day of March, Jesus and the apostles began their journey up the hills toward Jerusalem. Lazarus of Bethany had been down to the Jordan twice to see Jesus, and every arrangement had been made for the Master and his apostles to make their headquarters with Lazarus and his sisters at Bethany, as long as they might desire to stay in Jerusalem.
So they had been friends for a long time, so Jesus enjoyed spending time with them, right? Millie, would you take the next one?
The disciples of John remained at Bethany beyond, teaching and baptizing the multitudes, so that Jesus was accompanied only by the 12 when he arrived at Lazarus' home. Here Jesus and the apostles tarried for 5 days, resting and refreshing themselves before going on to Jerusalem for the Passover. It was a great event in the lives of Martha and Mary to have the Master and his apostles in the home of their brother, where they could minister to their needs.
We were already good for
One Sunday morning, April 6th, Jesus and the apostles went down to Jerusalem, and this was the first time that the Master and all of the 12 had been there together.
They've been at Lazarus' home, right? Okay, that's it. Pam, you can pray for us? What is that?
Dear Heavenly Father, we thank you for our many blessings and thank you for bringing us here together on Sunday. We ask that you help us go out and be one with you, and let us shine in your light to others. As we ask in Jesus' name, amen.
Amen. Thank you for joining us at home. Please come see us again. And stuff the camera secret.
If I may share a personal experience with respect to the ministering to the sick, when we were reading that part of the paper a minute ago, I was thinking, and we had a discussion about, do they have power to heal and what else?